and its effect on our society. We want to welcome all of you to this important conversation. Our goal is to have this conversation on a regular basis, possibly every week, every other week, to understand what is the impact of this racism in the American society, but most importantly, what is this racism's impact in our own community, whether this is a Muslim community in total, if it is specifically Bangladeshi American community, if it is in our own household. How does this systemic racism that is so ingrained in our society, in our psychology, in our understanding of humanity, how does that impact the society as a whole, the race as a whole? Today, CNN's breaking news is that Minneapolis City Council members are intending to defund and dismantle police department. Today, in London, the protesters toppled statue of a slave trader. So today, across the world, not in just Minneapolis, not just in New York, not just in America, across the world, the symbols of racism, symbols that signify, that glorifies the slavery, the discrimination for the blacks and people of colors. Those symbols are being taken out. People are fighting against it all over the world. We want to understand from our speakers today, how is that systemic racism works and its effect on our society, inshallah ta'ala. We have two wonderful speakers today, Imam Khalid Griggs and Dr. Zahid Bukhari. Many of you know them. We'll inshallah introduce them shortly. But before we go forward, we want to start today's event with recitation from Holy Quran. Our youth brother, Brother Musabi Tanveer, will be reciting from Quran. I welcome Brother Tanveer.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. يا أيها الذين آمنوا اجتنبوا كثيرا من الظن إن بعد الظن إثم ولا تجسسوا ولا يغتب بعضكم بعضا أيحب أحدكم أن يأكل لحم أخيه ميتا فكرهتموه واتقوا الله إن الله تواب رحيم. يا أيها الناس إنا خلقناكم من ذكر وأنثى وجعلناكم شعوبا وقبائل لتعارفوا إن أكرمكم عند الله أتقاكم إن الله عليم خبير. In the name of Allah, the most gracious, the most merciful, O you who have believed, avoid much negative assumption. Indeed, some assumption is sin, and do not spy or backbite each other. Would one of you like to eat the flesh of his brother when dead? You would detest it, and fear Allah. Indeed, Allah is accepting of repentance and merciful. O mankind, indeed we have created you from male and female, and made you people and tribes, that you may know one another. Indeed, the most noble of you in the sight of Allah is the most righteous of you. Indeed, Allah is knowing and acquainted. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Thank you, Brother Tanveer. At this time, I would like to welcome our beloved brother, Brother Abu Ahmed Nur Zaman, National Vice President for Muslim Ummah of North America, to give us the introductory talk, laying out the foundation for this continuing conversation. Brother Abu Ahmed Nur Zaman.
Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. As-salatu was-salamu ala Rasulihil Kareem. A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. كنتم خير أمة أخرجت للناس تأمرون بالمعروف وتنهون عن المنكر وتؤمنون بالله. صدق الله العظيم. Dear brother moderator, respected guest, and brothers and sisters, and our sons and daughters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. We, everyone knows we've been going through first the pandemic, and then we are going through some gruesome, unbelievable situation happening in America and all over the world now. We see the uprising of the youths, and people are talking for good and forbidding evil. I just recite the ayah from Surah Al Imran. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala say, you, the Muslim, you are the best nation. Allah has chosen you, brought forth you among the whole humanity so that you can enjoy good, what is good, and you can forbid what is wrong, and you can believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So Allah is actually is inviting us to a very just, beautiful society where we all can live together. But the recent situation, what happened in Minneapolis and on, this is not just an scattered or separate incident. In American society, those who know the history, some born here, some came from outside, maybe our forefathers came from outside. This society was built in such a way that many things is still in the DNA of the society, even though the racial systemic racism and against one group against another, this is not written in the book, but this is in the DNA, in the system. There is one agency that did a survey from 1913 to 2013 to 2019. There was 7,666 people were killed in the hands of police. 7,666 in a couple of years. So our brother George Floyd, who died on May 25th, it's not a separate and just the first time incident. This has been happening. And I hope the discussion has started and people are paying attention. The other day I was listening, President Obama was saying like, now people are paying attention and this is something we all have to take seriously. And we see people are taking seriously, not in America, all over the world. And আমাদের বাংলাদেশি ভাই বোনেরা যারা আছেন হয়তো ভাবতে পারেন যে এটা হঠাৎ করে কি শুরু হলো, কিন্তু আমরা যাদের রক্ত এবং ঘামের উপর দাঁড়িয়ে আমরা স্বাধীনতা ভোগ করতেছি তাদের ইতিহাস আমাদের জানা নাই। আপনারা হয়তো শুনেছেন অনেকগুলো জিনিসই, কিন্তু ইতিহাস জানার কারণে হয়তো অনেকের কাছে এই জিনিসটা বিচ্ছিন্ন মনে হবে। আমাদের আফ্রিকান আমেরিকান ব্রাদার্স, the black brothers, they did so much just to get the freedom for us and for everybody. But how many people of us can remember that? And among them, some like Rosa Parks, Martin Luther King Jr., or Malcolm X. We know some names. These are not the name. These are the history. And I hope today our guests will address some issues and they will teach us. President Obama, I mentioned a while ago, he was saying the other day, so this is a marathon. The whole nation has to wake up. This is a marathon. This is not a sprint. It's not going to be fixed in one day. Or maybe tomorrow, the Black Caucus will propose something to the Congress and they will work on it. But it's not going to go away. If you change the law and rule, but still you have to change the mindset of people. And this is what we need now. And we see the influence of it. So we have to educate. We have to activate. We have to mobilize and then act on it. So I asking everybody, please stay here. It's not going to be a long program. I hope you are listening from different people, but today you're going to be listening from some people who are the part of the even civil rights movement, who are the part and who are the foundation sometime, and of course the scholar. inshallah. Not only that, we like to address আমাদের বাংলাদেশি সহ মুসলমানদের কমিউনিটিতেও কিন্তু অনেকগুলো রেসিজম আছে। আমরা শুধু অন্যদের দিকে আঙ্গুল হয়তো আমরা আঙ্গুল নির্দেশ করতেছি। বা হাউ অ্যাবাউট আস, আমাদের মধ্যে কি আছে, এই নামে হোক অন্য কোনো নামে হোক, লেটস অ্যাড্রেস অল দি রেসিজম, all that is bad for humanity, and let's promote the good for humanity, inshallah. And let's have a very beautiful society and just society here and abroad. Jazakallah khairan. Thank you very much. And I hope everybody will stay and make dua for us. Inshallah, we're going to keep continue this conversation. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam wa. Thank you, Brother Abu Hamid Nur Zaman, National Vice President, Muslim Ummah of North America. At this time, I would like to invite Imam Khalid Abdul Fatah Griggs. He is the Imam of Imam of Community Mosque of Winston-Salem. He's also Associate Chaplain for Muslim Life at Wake Forest University. He is a Vice President of Islamic Circle of North America, member of Central Shura of ICNA, and board chairman of ICNA Council for Social Justice. He is a founding member of Muslim for Social Justice, member of Movement to End Racism and Islamophobia, board member of Interfaith Winston-Salem, and trustee of Parliament of the World's Religions. Imam Khalid is a human rights and prison reform activist, national lecturer, freelance writer, and author of Come Let Us Change This World, a brief history of Islamic Party in North America. He is the former editor of ICNA's Message magazine, Community Access Television board chairman, producer, and host. Brothers and sisters, please welcome Imam Khalid Griggs.
Assalamu alaikum. It is indeed a pleasure and my honor to have this opportunity to spend a few moments with those brothers and sisters who are members of Muna. You have a very, as you know, much better than I, but your track record of work and committed Islamic work and growth in this country has been phenomenal. And I think that you are very well situated, particularly in certain areas like in New York City, because of the groundwork that you've done over the years. You have built relationships with elected officials, with the mayor, with the governor. And it's often that from the vantage point where I come from, that if we're discussing anything related to the local government of New York City, one of the first comments is, well, we need to check in with Muna because they have established these great relationships. Brothers and sisters, I want to address this issue of systemic and structural racism and the gruesome effects that it's had on American society. But it's not just a gruesome effect on the victims of racism, but it stains the soul. The impact goes beyond just the victim. It also extends to the perpetrators. So bear with me just for a moment as I try to set some kind of historical context. And even before I get to that, I want to point something else out, which to me is very important in this discussion that I'm having and then we all are having, and Dr. Bukhari with Muna. You know, I am very interested in history. And I read a few years ago about some of the history of Bangladesh and the Bengali people. And I found it very interesting in some of the research that I was doing that starting in the late 1800s and into the beginning part of the 20th century, that many Bengalis at that time coming from India, from what was designated as India, that many Bengalis actually came into the United States, many as merchant sailors. And many of them had been involved in either the Khalifa movement in India, but if not that, many of these young men had been involved in opposition against British colonialism and some of the horrors that the British were committing against the Indian people at this time. And many of these Bengali sailors, merchant marine sailors, would come into port in New York City and then not jump off the ship, but get off the ship and not return back. And historically, what happened is that many of these early Bengalis in the United States who landed in New York City ended up moving to what at that time was the largest Black city population-wise on the planet, and this was Harlem. And because of this large influx of Bengalis coming into Harlem, and because of the large influx of African-American people who were fleeing the South because of racial terrorism at the end of the 19th century into the 20th century, over 7 to 10 million Black people fled the South and spread out all over the country, but many ended up in New York. Many ended up in Harlem, and as they were settling in Harlem, many of your perhaps parents or grandparents or great-grandparents were marrying some of these migrants, these Black migrants and others. Now, with that having been said, when we look at the issue of systemic or structural racism in this country, we have to go back to the very foundation of the nation. The nation, the United States of America, was founded on structural racism and white supremacy. The Europeans that came into this landmass, when they first came here, they were identified by the countries that they came from. They called themselves, we're British, we're Spanish, we're French, we're German. But because of this situation, what was going on in this country, the intent to spread, the eventual intent to spread from the East Coast to the West Coast, from the the Midwest to the Southwest, the identification of these Europeans changed. And no longer were they identifying themselves as coming from a certain country, now they were white. In America is where this concept of white identification from European people and the racial identity being elevated and citizenship based on racial identity is started from the very foundation of this country. What was implemented at this time as well was this system of structural racism. Let's just look in one area, because systemic structural racism simply means that the various components, the various aspects of American society, whether we're talking about the economic institutions, the political institutions, whether we're talking about social institutions, every element, every component, every aspect of American society has been tainted, has been steeped in, and with racism, and it's been structured into the life of the American people from the beginning. Look at just the police for an example, a very quick example. The police departments all across the United States today have been patterned on the organization of slave patrols. Slave patrollers were individuals, white individuals who were recruited to help recapture or to capture enslaved Africans who had escaped from plantations and to bring them back onto the plantations. Their larger function as slave patrols was to protect the interests of planters, of Southern planters, and to make sure that there would be no rebellions, that there would be no revolts, collectively or individually, amongst those enslaved people on these plantations. This was rooted in the South These slave patrols historically started in the state of South Carolina, and spread all across the South. But the model for policing is historically based on these slave patrols. So it should come as no surprise to any of us when we see the kinds of behaviors that these police officers all across the country. I'm not saying that all of the cops, policemen across the country, are killer cops or rogue cops like this individual and his three accomplices who murdered George Floyd on the streets of Minneapolis, Minnesota, with a crowd around, bystanders around, civilians standing around begging this officer to take his knee off this man's neck, with Mr. Floyd himself pleading with this one particular officer to take his foot off his neck because he couldn't breathe, that he was in distress, that this officer, and no one can convince me otherwise, had devalued the life of this Black man who was unarmed, who was surrounded by other officers and pinned to the pavement on his face, that he had so little regard for the life of this human being. He was so steeped in racism that police department in Minneapolis, and again, I'm not saying that everyone on the police force is like this, but the culture of the Minneapolis, Minnesota Police Department has tolerated these kinds of behaviors over the years. As a matter of fact, as we all know at this juncture, that this particular police officer with his knee on Mr. Floyd's neck had so many discrimination charges filed against him, so many acts of misconduct as a police officer, but yet he was still allowed to be on this Minneapolis, Minnesota Police Department. There was an FBI report a couple of years ago that stated very clearly that in their investigation of the composition of police departments all across the United States, they were very clear in identifying that all of these police departments have elements of white supremacy by having in their departments Ku Klux Klansmen, having neo-Nazis. There's a new kind of more vague group of racists now in this country called Boogaloo. They motivate people through Facebook. It's been proved that many of these police officers, when their Facebook accounts are investigated, they're found to be a part of this new, as I say, Facebook. They're just kind of like, like wind or something. They like shape shifters where they can just go into any aspect of American life and be able to spread their vile teachings and their vile philosophy. So historically, what has happened in this country, not just in police departments, but in the areas of access to the spoils of America, to those amenities in America, structural systemic racism in this country has denied opportunities to gain access. And, there's a saying that's so often stated when people are asked, well, why don't Black people do like everybody else who comes into the country as immigrants and just pull themselves up by their bootstraps? Dr. Martin Luther King was very articulate in explaining the attitude of people who say that, as well as the phenomenon itself, when he said that most of the people that you're referring to don't have any boots to be able to pull the straps and to uplift themselves in American society. And it was, and it is because of this phenomena, structural and systemic racism. Now, racism is something that every society, you will find racists in every society on this earth. Whether we're talking about in Muslim countries, whether we're talking about Muslim majority countries, in every population center, every place where there are citizens, there are residents who are non-white, if there is a substantial non-white population, and that environment is based on whiteness and based on affording the white population privileges that are denied to others in the population, we will find acts and attitudes and practices of racism. And more often than not, you would find structural and systemic racism. And I would be remiss if I didn't point out that this vile attitude, something that the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ did not tolerate. He didn't even tolerate the verbal abuse, not to talk about systemic racism, where the society is structurally organized in a way to deny people their citizenship rights based on their color. The Prophet Muhammad ﷺ would even object it and stop instantly whenever he heard about any racist comments coming from any of the Sahaba. And in the interest of time, I'm not going to go through a lot of this history because I don't want to take up any Dr. Bukhari's time here. But the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ was the model for us to look at and turn to today. Because even as Muslims, because of either the structural racism that is so pervaded, that is so immersed, so into American society, but if any of us come from a nation that has a colonial history, has been occupied by a colonial power, then there could very possibly be residue, there could be holdovers from the divide and conquer mentality that colonizers and enslavers and others who are implementing oppression in their lands. This is the primary tool that is used, of divide and conquer. And so in American society, and I'll just say a couple of things and I'll be quiet here. As we watch examples of looting, as we watch people breaking into stores, and some of you may actually have been victimized by some of this lawless behavior, mostly after demonstrations. I think it's very key that we understand that the majority of the lawlessness, the disregard for others' property, is not a function of protest against structural and systemic racism, and in particular, that behavior directed at people of African descent. We have to separate the two things. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made a divine command through his words and through the words of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu and his prophetic sunnah, that we are to be the standard bearers for justice. And the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu and Allah in the Quran make it clear that if you and I sit in a society and watch racism and structural and systemic racism play out in the society every day, and we don't do something to raise our voices, our collective and individual voices, if we don't do anything to try to stop this racism, even if we are listening to others tell jokes, racist jokes about another group of people, we are contributing to the problems of the society in this regard. And so being victimized, if my house gets broken into, if the masjid gets broken into, and people are hungry and they're starving and they have been oppressed, and they know that those people at the community mosque of Winston-Salem, North Carolina are not doing anything to try to help meet the needs, to speak out against the wrong that's being done in society, then how can I be surprised if someone who has been victimized for this long reaches out in a way, not from just trying to be lawless, but just out of desperation. But we have to separate those acts from the protests. The last thing I'm gonna say is that my granddaughter, I was having a conversation with her last night, and my granddaughter said, you know, Poppy, is like this, how I see it. She said, when I see people striking out in urban rebellions, she said, it's like if I'm at school, and as soon as I get to school, somebody drops a heavy book bag on my toe, and my toe starts hurting. But it's not enough right then for me to cry out or anything, oh, it hurts. But then during the course of the day, someone pushes a desk into that same toe. Somebody drops a book on that toe. She goes home. Something else falls on the toe. And her mom, her dad are there observing her, and they see how she screams out, she cries out. And she said, well, Poppy, it's not because of that single act. It's been the series of acts causing pain in my toe. And that last desk, last chair, recliner that got pushed into my foot, I hollered out. But it was not just one act, it was a series of acts. So I'm going to stop at this particular point, and I apologize if I've taken too much time. I pray that we have some questions so Dr. Bukhari and I can address the current phenomenon, historical phenomena, by addressing your questions. Assalamu alaikum.
Thank you, Imam Khalid Griggs. Wonderful discussion. We had a lot of comments coming in through Facebook and through our YouTube channel. I would highly encourage brothers and sisters to subscribe to our YouTube channel, Muna TV USA. Some of the comments touches on the Black Lives Matter movement itself. Some of the responses that, in the traditional media of all lives matter, and how that weakens the Black Lives Matters concept and the movement itself. So I was listening to this particular lecture, and they were talking about how, if the way Imam Khalid Griggs explained, if your hand is broken, you don't cry out, say all bones matter. You cry out, I need to fix my hand because that's broken. So right now in our society, the Black and the people of color are the ones suffering, and we need to fix it. So by saying that all lives matter, we're actually weakening. We are not putting the due focus on the problem at hand. So I hope you understand that. But we have an extremely good friend of the organization and a good friend to the Muslim community in general, Dr. Zahid Bukhari. Dr. Zahid Bukhari, he is an ex-ICNA president, Amir, and Dr. Zahid Bukhari right now serves as an executive director for ICNA Council for Social Justice. He has done many publications. A lot of our Muna brothers and sisters have heard from you many times in Muna Convention and in various other events. I don't want to go too much into your bio. I want to give you the time to actually talk. But Dr. Bukhari has a master's in economics from the University of Karachi, Pakistan, and he has a PhD in political science from University of Connecticut. So he's an expert in this particular field, especially given a PhD in political science and have done many studies of Muslims in America. And so without further ado, I request my dear friend, Dr. Zahid Bukhari to speak.
نحمده ونصلي على رسوله الكريم أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. Thank you, Arman Bhai. And really, from the bottom of my heart, I would like to thank the Muna leadership for arranging this webinar with Imam Khalid Griggs. And it's wonderful to always listening to Imam Khalid Griggs on these type of issues. The time which we have, so I would like to distribute like in three sections. One is that how can we understand the present situation? It's not only this police brutality and racism, but also the coronavirus also. From the Quranic perspective, how can we understand that? Second section, I like to discuss that how can we determine our role, although some things also already came up, and Imam Khalid explained that from the Quran and Sunnah, how we can determine our role. And third section will be very practical, that what should we do or what can we do, what type of different tools and the different type of action we can do to counter this situation, to take part in this urban uprising. So as an organization, as an Islamic worker, as a very informed citizen, what should be and what could be done in this regard. As far as the understanding the situation, it's not only this, I think it's a very interesting that first coronavirus happened all over the globe since February or March. And then from this Memorial Day weekend, we have this killing. And it was a norm in America, but this time the reaction becomes so historical that everybody is amazed that not only in America, but it is a global reaction on those type of issues. I would suggest very humbly that Surah Ar-Rum give us a wonderful Quranic perspective on these international issues and all these type of societal issues. If we remember, Surah Ar-Rum was revealed in 5th year of Nabuwah in Meccan period. And it talks about future prediction in international politics. All other Quranic surah, they explain the historical aspects of different ummahs before that, different aqwam before Rasul Akram sallallahu alaihi wasallam, previous Anbiya. So explain that about all those things. But Surah Rum was explaining the future. And over there, that there was the glad tidings was explained by Allah Subhanahu wa Taala that the Roman or the Christian will be victorious, and on the same day Muslims will also be victorious. So I don't want to go into detail of that, but what I'm saying that is a very future prediction type surah, and also relationship with the Christian world also explained over there. And in the same year, Hijrat Habshawa also happened when Rasul Akram sallallahu alaihi wasallam asked Sahaba, when there were a lot of zulm going on, to migrate to Habsha, where a Christian king was ruling, but he has a fear of Allah, and he received those guests in a wonderful way over there. But in one of this ayah, Surah Rum, this is Surah number 30 and ayah number 41. That is the point I'd like to mention here. ظهر الفساد في البر والبحر بما كسبت أيدي الناس ليذيقهم بعض الذي عملوا لعلهم يرجعون. And the translation is, corruption has appeared throughout the land and sea by reason of what the hands of people have earned, so He, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, may let them taste part of the consequences of what they have done, that perhaps they will return to righteousness. I think if we just think about that, and apply that what is happening. If we see the data, American population in the globe is 5%. But right now, the death for coronavirus is 27% death happened in America. If we include England, France, Germany, Spain, and Italy, the percentage of total death in 6 countries, although their population is 8% of their globe, the total almost 2/3 death happened in these countries. And if we include Russia and Brazil and one or two more countries, and I think recently a study came out from England, 90% death happened over there. So the issue is that there are Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying that some amal are responsible, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala giving them taste of those amal. So if we see that those amal, and we are not saying that. I think during 90s, Eisenhower Academy, they gathered a lot of scholars and businessmen from right, from left, from center, and they came up that there are 4 issues America could not resolve that. American exceptionalism could not resolve those issues. One is racism. Second is economic inequality. Third is family breakdown. Fourth is the place of religion in the society. And then some other scholars include 2 more issues. Fifth one is that the imperialism and killing, especially after September 11, and before also the history of that, killing of internationally, killing of Muslim or all other nations, Vietnam and all of them. And fifth is the climate change and what we are doing with the nature, with the world, what we are doing. So these issues are there, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is asking us that you will be tasting. I am giving the taste of the consequences of those amal, and the objective is that we should come back to righteousness. So I think this perspective is important, that now this after coronavirus and now the racism, that the number one issue with even American scholars accepted that's the issue we could not resolve. And now the issue is all over the globe, and people are feeling that. And as Imam Khalid Griggs very wonderfully explained that last 300-400 years of racism about Native American, about Afro-American and Black community, what they have done. So I think in that perspective, we should understand that this is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's sunnah is there when there are a lot of wrongdoings are going on. So some of the amal, what nation is doing, people are doing, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala giving them taste of those amal, and the only objective is that they should come back to righteousness. Second section is then what should be our role? Even I think it was mentioned before. In Surah Al-Hadid, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is explaining that He has sent all messengers, including Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, 140,000 or whatever numbers of Rasul came or Anbiya came. Why? No, He sent them with the bayanat, with the scripture and with mizan. What is the reason? That the people affairs should be established on justice. So that is the prime reason for all Payghambar. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent them to the world here, to this planet Earth, and with the bayanat and with the scripture and with mizan, the reason and the ultimate result Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is looking for, that the people's affairs should be established on justice. And for us also, it was explained that this is our Quranic duty to stand up for justice. And one hadith, I think probably everybody, we have heard about that and read about that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, if you see any bad thing, this is your duty to remove it with your hand. If not possible, to say something about that with your tongue. And if it is not possible, at least feel bad about that bad thing, a bad action, a bad deed in your heart. And this is the zaif, this is the very poor means daraja of iman. And if you are not doing that, that's a very dangerous situation. So I think for us is standing up for justice, for us following the prophetic all tradition of ultimately the affairs of the world should be established on justice. And this is our duty to do something. I think we should think about what is going on around us, or this police brutality, or racism, or any other bad thing. We have to do something. And it's not only individually, we have to do collectively. So what can we do? If those things are established, and because the time constraint, I am just explaining it quickly, not elaborating it. But I think if those things are established, then the issue comes: what can we do, and what should we do? I think if I will make 4 or 5 points. One is we have to educate ourselves, because I understand when I came also here. So we have subcontinent backgrounds. Over there, we read history of Europe or history of subcontinent. So we don't know about American history. Whatever we are watching and looking at in the urban cities, probably we are not aware of the background, as Imam Khalid Griggs was telling us. So we have to educate ourselves what is going on, what is racism, what is economic inequality, what is family background breakdown, and what are the reasons? What is the place of religion here, the imperialism of America, the climate change, whatever we are doing. So you will find that that education is very much needed. The racism is behind several issues here in America. And for example, in this corona pandemic, in New York Times, there were news items that the Latino and Blacks community, they are having disproportionately higher number of patients. In American jail, at this time, the American Blacks and Latino, their population is probably 30% but in the jail, is 2.3 million people are in American jails, in county jails and city jails and statewide and federal prisons. 2.3 million. 59% they are from this Latino and Black population. So it's a very disproportionate system. The racism over there also, the disproportionate is a bad thing happening in everywhere. In police killing also, we published that. So 62% or more than that killing happening with the minorities by the police officer. So you can find in every field that this discrimination, this racism, the manifestation of racism is there. So we have to educate ourselves. That's the number one thing. And there could be several tools we can use. Number two thing is that there are several things we can do. For example, Muna has chapters, mashallah, the leadership and youth and everybody. Yes, they should be educated. They can organize a rally. They can participate with the sponsorship with the other organization or rally. They can, or as you are organizing this webinar, you can organize more and more webinars. Your different chapters can organize webinar. You can also sponsor billboard. We are also working on a billboard and design will be finalized. So we are working together on all those issues. Then we can, then there will be a lot of legislation is coming up. Because that social change movement, that historical movement we are looking at right now, we are participating. And when we are midst of the participation, probably we don't know the significance of that. Probably those who participated in like Martin Luther King March, or they participated in the civil rights movements. I think no, historically, history established that these were the historical movements. At that time, maybe people are not realizing that. The same thing for us. But we should think about that we are witnessing, we are participating a historical moment in American history. It will be remembered for generation, inshallah ta'ala. And social change and economic change and political change will happen, inshallah ta'ala. So we should be ready for that. There should be legislative agenda from city to federal to the Congress. We should participate that way also. So there will be a lot of opportunities coming. But how we position ourselves? If we are positioning ourselves on the right side of the history with the oppressed people, those who are facing injustice for centuries, then we will remember that. Look at South Africa. Muslim population is 1.4, almost we can say 1.5%. But because they participated in a movement against apartheid, and they work with the Black community over there and South African community over there, that 1.5% and 1.5% Muslim, they have very important impact on the political discourse and the social discourse of South Africa. Here also we should think, yes, we are maybe 1%, 2%, or 3%, whatever percentage we are. But if we are on the right side of the poverty, if the history, and we work together with all those communities, inshallah ta'ala, our contribution will have certain impact. Another thing also very important, that we have to create alliances in these days. That is a wonderful opportunity. Tremendous opportunity is there, that we should work with the local community, with the black community, with the black masajid, with the black imams, with the non-Muslim black community also. Our heart should be open, giving them more, because they are facing what we never faced that. They are facing 400 years of discrimination or racism. So we should be ready to work with them too, inshallah ta'ala. So making alliance is also very important. And I think that should be in the country, means county-wise alliances, the city-wise, the state-wise, and nationally, those alliances are very much important. And then participating in them peacefully, definitely all those demonstration alliances with the higher objective, and the practice should be very peaceful as our Islamic duty and American duty. But we have to show our solidarity, we have to show our concern, we have to show our generosity, and working with all these different groups. I think in that way we can have some impact, and that way we can also participate and a little bit contribution in this social change, a big change, inshallah ta'ala, it will be happening in America. So I think in that way, and then we can think about a lot of other points also. For example, this police reform, there are several levels. One, I think, a bill or act already been presented in the Congress, that is about the qualified immunity. Then we need to have demilitarization of police. We need to have their sensitive training. We need to purge, like the white supremacists should not be in the police. Their recruitment in that way, that white supremacists should not be part of the police. They have sensitive training also, different culture, different religion, something like that. And then also about the community oversighting, our community review board should be established in a powerful way. Then the overall Congress oversight should be very much there. So there are several aspects, and hopefully there will be a law, there will be laws, there will be act, there will be congressional resolution will be coming up. And then federal law, there are so many in the structural, when we say structural racism, there are at least 13 federal law since maybe second president of America, the last 200, more than 200 of year of history, that very bluntly discrimination against the black population. But those has to be repealed. So, and there are a lot of studies happen on that. There, it was described in that. I think 50 or more than 50 years ago, there was a commission, and Imam Khalid Griggs mentioned in one of his articles. They discuss about the race relation. Whatever recommendation they presented, those are not implemented. That commission, I think that report has to be reread and by the policymakers, and those recommendations, they were not implemented. They should be implemented. So there are a lot of work. We have to educate ourselves. We have to make alliances with Muslims as well as non-Muslim organizations. We have to make alliances, especially the communities of Afro-Americans, the Latino, and all other communities, especially the black community leadership, Muslims as well as non-Muslim, major organization, and working together with them. Then inshallah, we can also learn about it. Then it is not only resolving that issue, it will be for us also having empowerment in this political system here, empowerment in the social structure in America. That is also will be beneficial, but because then we can definitely perform our duty of which we say that there should be an ummah, there should be a group, and those saying a good thing and also asking about bad thing not should be there, and that is the duty of, as a Muslim, we should be doing that. So I think that is very important, focusing here in this land with our youth, because they can relate very, very much, and they should be talking to other inshallah ta'ala organization. They can talk very in a very most in effective way. So in that way, I think we can think about, and then if you have more discussion, you can also come up with different aspects, different tools, different action. Social media is another field, is a very, very important, and our young ones especially, they should be active in that. So over there in Twitter, in YouTube, in Facebook, and Instagram, they should be putting pictures, they should be putting news items and Muna activities. They have to become of that. Yes, we are showing Muslims for justice, Muslims for working for with the black community. I think all these instruments and tools are important. But I think if we understand the Quranic perspective of what is going on, then we understand in the Quranic and Islamic perspective of our role, then inshallah we will feel more comfortable discussing all those points and then acting upon all those different items of action items, inshallah ta'ala, under Muna leadership. Wa akhiru da'wana alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen.
Jazakallah khairan, Dr. Zahid Bukhari. Alhamdulillah, mashallah, wonderfully put together. We'll inshallah go into Q&A session. I would request Brother Naqibur Rahman to join me, inshallah. So we have some questions coming through our Facebook and YouTube channels, and inshallah we will we'll ask you those questions. And if anybody, I request all our viewers to write your question either in Facebook or in YouTube live, and we'll catch up from there, inshallah. We'll catch your comments. And Naqibur Rahman, should we also open up our phone to take questions, or
Inshallah.
we can do that as well. So anybody have questions there on the phone, you can raise your hand, and we'll hopefully get to you as well. So the first question that I have here came from Dr. Said Rahman Chaudhary. The question is that right now people of all color are denouncing the racism and what's going on in the world right now. What are the steps can be taken to make this momentum successful against all sorts of racism? So I think sometimes we see this movement a little bit of going in all direction, in the sense that we have many different players in the movements, and this is not a national coordinated movement. These are all in a way very uniquely, organically developed around the world. So how does, what we need to do for this momentum to be successful? I'll throw it to both of you, whoever wants to answer it.
Yeah. I'll take a stab at it. I think it's important for us to appreciate, as Dr. Bukhari has already made reference to, we need to appreciate the work that folks have done consistently for the last 20, 30, 40, 50 years, and not enter into this social justice arena thinking, like, well, we're here now, so everybody else just sort of stand back. There are people whose lives, and these could be very young people, but they are very experienced in bringing issues forth and drawing attention to issues. After the attention has been drawn to these issues, that's when the second part of the hard work begins. And that is to try to either change legislation. You can't legislate attitudes. You can't legislate racist ideas that people may have and racist feelings that they may have. I think the 1964 Civil Rights Act demonstrates that, because if anything, the disparity in wealth between the white community and black community, the wealth gap has even widened. There is a larger percentage of black folks in prison today than there were 50, 60 years ago. The social markers in the society are very clear that you can't two things. One, that you can't legislate people's feelings. And so this movement is not trying to remove necessarily the racist feelings that people have, but what laws and changes in laws, the advantage that they have, and what we should be working towards, aspect of what we should be working towards. These change in legislation, like Dr. Bukhari mentioned this qualified immunity. Qualified immunity is an act that goes back to 1871 in this country. And it's something that law enforcement and other government officials, but particularly law enforcement, have been able to hide behind once they commit these horrible acts, they've been able to not get the full brunt of prosecution as a result of this Qualified Immunity Act. And so to identify things like that is extremely important. And I think we need to speed up our learning curve because things are changing every single day. And it's like you're trying to grab smoke. And so identify what we can do best. Where can we best make a contribution? Sometimes that's just with money. For an example, many protesters, and we've had a number of young people in Dallas, Texas, young Muslims, to have been arrested. I think it's at least 3 or 4 have been arrested. And so if our organizations or if we as individuals are not in a position or not inclined towards demonstrations and this kind of thing, we can help bail these young people and others out. This was a major function of people that had wealth during the civil rights movement. The people who were getting arrested for the most part didn't have the money to get out. So those who had money were able to donate. And this was a very important part. So we have to look at what it is that we are best suited to do. It may not be on the street. It may be money. It may be organizational ability. Muna, and this is the last thing I'm going to say, Muna has outstanding demonstrated organizational capacity. And oftentimes when things are organized, street protests and other things, that organizational capacity may not be reflected, by the various demonstrations. And so if it's organizational ability, whatever it is, I think we have to offer that at this very historic moment in history.
Thank you very much. Brother Zahid Bukhari, this is really, I'm going to ask you this question that came from one of the brothers, Brother Ahnaf. So the question centers around defunding police and abolishing police department. Obviously, that is very radical in terms of what we have in what can be done, right? City of Minneapolis actually are thinking about defunding police department and abolishing it. There was some CNN headline news. Now, my question is this: today, you have a police officer can be disciplined in New York and move to New Jersey and get a job as a police officer, or move to Baltimore and get a job as a police officer. So if you take the both of these ideas of defunding police at the same time, a police is almost can work with impunity. How do we address that? What policy decision can be taken? Brother Zahid Bukhari, we cannot hear you. You're muted.
I'm sorry. Yeah. So first thing I would say, when all this movement is going on and upheaval and uprising is going on, so you will find pendulum going right to left, and all these type of different, very extreme proposal will be on the table in certain part of the country, certain counties, certain cities. But I think ultimately all this pressure will be that, as I explained, that there will be several reforms act will be, inshallah, will be presented and hopefully it will be passed. That is, for example, police review, community review board in different communities. That is very important. Overall Congress oversight is very important. Then the demilitarization of very important. Their training, who is training the police is very important. Their sensitive training is important. Their qualified immunity is important. So all different aspects will be going on, and the new recruitment. And I think the immigrant community, I know and I understand in New York, a lot of our newly immigrant brothers, they are part of the police. So I think all those things will be going on, and then ultimately it will have some impact. But on the right now, it's not the choosing one very extreme opinion like defund police or finish abolish the police. No, I think the conversation is going on, and then it's a good act will be inshallah presented in Congress and different states assembly or something like that. The other point previously, I think I like to mention when we have the point, because we have to, it's not only one time and then 1, 2, 3 months, we are very excited and then things should go to the normal. No, I think we have to learn consistently working with the local groups and learning from local level and then the national. Right now, there is a one opportunity. Reverend William Barber from South Carolina, I think, Imam Khalid Griggs.
North Carolina.
From North Carolina, I'm sorry, very famous for Moral Monday. He has started a campaign of Poor People's Campaign. Huge campaign. It's a grassroots campaign all over the country. I think as Muslim, as ICNA, as Muna, as our own group, we have to join. They are doing a digital mobilization on June 20th. We should register over there. As a Muslim, we should register that. They should know that Muslims are part of that campaign. And they are tackling all those issues. Poverty and police and hunger and family issues. They are tackling all those issues. So it's a poor people's campaign. I will inshallah provide you more information. I think our brothers, Muna brothers and sisters, Young One, Ikna brothers and sisters, CSJ, all, and we'll be talking to Mass and everybody, that we should join that movement. So that is a very grassroots movement. And wherever there are other local groups, Black Lives Matters, or Dream, for, something like that. So I think we should be, New York, you will find several other groups. So we should be working with them, because things is, we have to have sustainable relationship. We have to continue this relationship of working together. And then ultimately, this, if structural racism is here for 400 years, it will not go away in 1 year or 1 month. No, we have to work together, maybe for coming decades, inshallah ta'ala. But that is very important for us to understand and then work in that way.
Thank you very much. We should take a question from the phone. Do we have anybody ask?
Inshallah, those of you who joined over the phone, we have close to 100 brothers and sisters on the phone. So if you have a question, yes, we have, please press *5. So the first questioner, I'm unmuting you. Inshallah, our brothers would be able to hear you. The last 4 digit is 7978. I just unmuted you, so please ask your question.
Assalamu alaikum. This is Dalwar from New York.
Yes, Brother Dalwar, go ahead.
Brother Zahid, Brother Khalid, thank you very much for your wonderful speech. I have 2 questions. The first question is that, I think a couple of minutes ago, Brother Zahid mentioned about that, the training of the police. And those police are very brutal. It came in the newspaper and on social media that they are especially trained by Israeli police. So how can we mobilize our policymakers against this policy? Number 1. Number 2, now we are talking about this Black Lives Matter. Now, definitely our American brothers are more oppressed. And they are facing more brutality than other minority groups in the country. Is it possible to accommodate all the people? Somehow, sometimes some white people also, substituted by these white the police. So instead of having the Black Lives Matter, is it possible to launch a movement about American Lives Matter? Because you see, our policymakers will sometimes, because of our foreign policy, we are sending our troops, and thousands of troops are sacrificing their lives. So in order to change in the policy, is it possible to launch a American Lives Matters movement where we can accommodate all the people, all the minorities, all colors, black, white, everything in the same platform, in order to put pressure on the policymakers to change the overall policy?
Thank you very much, Dalwar. Yeah.
Yes, that's a very good 2-part question. And I just want to dovetail back to a previous question and answering and addressing this about the police department. One of the reasons, and I think we should be very clear about this, one of the reasons why all over the country you're hearing the cries for defund the police department, it's two things. One is that the police are based, the model is based on a racist, oppressive model of slave patrols. And so if you have built something on a bad model, you can't expect a lot of good to come from that. So whereas I'm not advocating defunding the police department, but if in fact it takes the threat of defunding local police departments, if that becomes a heartfelt, loud threat, that may be pressure. It's almost like an economic boycott or something. Sometimes the threat of a boycott is enough to get people to straighten up their act a little bit. Something radical has to be done in order to get these police department and these policemen, the road cops, to start acting like human beings. And so I think this is the genesis of why this is even coming up, because something radical has to be done. Perhaps a new model. It's not a statement of trying to say that you don't need policemen or you don't need law enforcement, but the law enforcement has to be a vehicle that serves the community and protects the community, and not target and occupy. It's basically what they're doing. This other issue about all like immigrant lives matter and Latino lives matter and all of this. These are very legitimate points. What we have to understand, one of the good social developments in the protest movement has come about in these in a genuine kind of way in the last few years. Dr. Bukhari mentioned the Poor People's Campaign. It prides itself on being a fusion movement, that bringing together people from all religions, the doctors, the teachers, and all like this. If you and I now divert attention away at this moment, historic moment in America, if we don't plug into, if we are not lending our efforts to trying to break down this racist structure of structural racism in this country, and the greatest victims for over 400 years in this country are Black people. Let me say this real quick. As an African American and as a Muslim, I've experienced both of the the blows that have come as a result of that, as a result of being Black and growing up in the apartheid South, and then being Muslim in an environment where Islamophobia has just been out of control and has displayed itself in so many different ways. But one thing we should be clear about, what the immigrant or a Muslim community is going through right now, and what the Muslim community has gone through since 9/11, I'm not trying to compare people's misery, like it's some misery index that we can put on a chart and say, well, these people at the top of the chart. But what the Muslim and immigrant community are going through and have been going through, it cannot be compared to what Black people have gone through in this country, right? This Muslim community in this country has the highest income, has the highest educational achievement level of any Muslim grouping in the world. And so this is because that element of structural racism has not precluded the advancement in certain kinds of ways, right? As it has been directed specifically at Black people in this country. So my appeal right at this moment is to, and I'm not saying that we don't need an immigrant's lives matter or anything like that, but don't miss this historic opportunity to be a part and a contributor to what has become a very this concept, this flooding place now, intersectionality, meaning that the interests of different groups and different people come together because you recognize that there's a common oppressor and you bring to the table your different interests. But right now, to me, it's not the time to start talking about all lives matter or immigrant lives matter. That's not the time. We're missing the moment in time in which we're living, to try to break down some barriers that will be beneficial for everybody in this country.
Thank you, Dr. Khalid. Dr. Zahid Bukhari, you have any insight?
Yeah, I think brother asked one question about Congress also. 2-3 things I think on all those issues. One is that I think those brothers and sisters, they are active in their own districts. Start meeting with the congressmen and discuss that issue of racism and police brutality, and ask them to come up with the reforms, different type of bill. Discuss with that. What are the issues? So all these 7-8 points we discussed before. So they are in the brochure. They are in the ICNA brochure also. The Mona can also publish that, inshallah, more material. So you should discuss with congressmen or congresswomen. We need to have several bills to reform that police. Include the sensitive training, include their Israeli training, include their recruitment and white supremacists over there. This community overview. Include this immunity, qualifying immunity, demilitarization, their budget. So what they are doing. So more representation of, for example, in one city, what is the population ratio? That should be in the police. It's in one city, maybe black population is more, all police is white. That is very disaster. So I think you can start discussing those points with your congressman, with your elected official, number one. Number two, another it's a district level, local level election is DA, district attorney. That is the most important election because there is an alliance between district attorneys and police officers. So, for example, in Baltimore, what happened a couple of years before, police people, including Afro-American police officer, I think they put a person in the van in that type of condition and hit him, and he ultimately died. Those 4 or whatever number of police officers, they were arrested. After 1 or 2 years, they got free. They could not get anything from the court. So because the whole justice system is unjust. So this DA election in your local areas are very important. I think all these DA, we have to have some independent people over there. That is also important. And number 3, very quick remarks about Black Lives Matter. I understand there is a lot of that discussion, but that's really diluting the issue. When you have focus on one issue, if Black Lives Matter, really it happened, all other lives will also be matter, inshallah, in America. But right now we should focus on there. Don't dilute that issue with, okay, it should be there, it should be here. That is the other people, their demand is dilute that issue. No, I think it would be good for us strategy-wise also. Focus this issue, then inshallah things will be much better for all other communities.
Thank you very much, Dr. Zahid Bukhari. Thank you, Dr. Imam Khalid. So I think this has been a wonderful conversation. I have learned a lot, and I'm confident our viewers learned a lot as well. But Tariq, do we have time to take one more question and then we can?
Yeah, we'll just we have a phone. I just unmuted. So please go ahead and ask your question from California.
All right, thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum. Omar Huda. I have had the fortune of serving in Pakistan Army, Bangladesh Army, and the US Army. The reason I say that is because I've been through all of that, and I want to specifically talk about the police defunding and all that. I have written a letter to the mayor of Los Angeles, Mr. Eric Garcetti, who I saw his interview only yesterday. He is absolutely adamant at not doing anything in preserving this police chief, which everybody wants out. I am talking not about defunding. I am talking about disbanding the police. Now let me explain. That is not a very radical idea. I was in Bangladesh Army, and after 1975, the assassination of the president, followed by assassination of second president, President Ziaur Rahman. In between and after that, there were terrible riots and indiscipline. We disbanded regiments. And then, of course, in somewhere down the road, Bangladesh Rifles, the border forces, security forces, they carried out a revolution and they killed scores of officers and even raped their wives. We disbanded the entire border security forces and we raised completely different one. We also had another force called Rokhi Bahini, trained by Indian Raw. We disbanded that and created another militia. So I am just saying to you that in my own short experience of about 22 years of service in the army, I have seen through several disbanding of army units, disbanding of border security forces, disbanding of civil militia forces, and rebuilding them. It is doable because they have never done it here. That's why they can think about it. Just like Dr. Bukhari said, or I believe another speaker said, this police was made as slave patrol, just like that in our subcontinent. The police was formed under colonial times, and so attitude is still there of corruption and everything. That's why I'm just saying that it is possible, and Minnesota has already started that, and I believe 6 or 7 other cities are starting in that line of completely defunding and even disbanding the police and completely forming new. And those ideas are being talked about. And that's
thank you very much, Jazakallah Khairan. Your thoughts, Dr. Zahid Bukhari?
No, I think that's fine. That's pure American way. I think different towns and different counties, if there is a movement, they can pass those laws, definitely. They can revamp the whole system over there. It's not that any, probably it is controlled by the city, by the state. So I think they can do that. If there is enough emotions over there, there could be referendum, there could be laws over there, and that's fine. I think that is the American way, that America work in that way. So if they pass, they should be implemented. What do you think, Imam Khalid? So it's not that issue.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think it goes even further. When we talk about structural racism, we have to recognize that every aspect of American society is steeped in that. This is steeped in white supremacy. Reread your U.S. Constitution or reread the buildup to the wording in the Constitution and what was even left in the Constitution. And I think that we'll see what's going on. There's a movement today, not just talking about the police, but there's a movement today where folks are actually, because of the oppressive practices that we find in prisons, state and federal and county jails, and in these other prisons, there's a movement now where people are saying, let's abolish the prisons. It doesn't mean that you would just let criminals and people inclined towards who committing criminal acts just run free. But the way that this prisons have been set up as plantations, have been set up because the 13th Amendment to the Constitution says that slavery is abolished except when people have committed crimes. And this government, through these prisons, are treating inmates like they are enslaved human beings. And in my opinion, if it ain't working, then get rid of it and put something in its stead that's going to be more humane, that's going to not be something like for us as Muslims on Yom Kippur, that we are brought in front of a law. Okay, well, this was going on. What did you do? What did you say? How did you act? We need to be on the right side of history here, and we need to be on the right side when we meet our Lord on Qiyamah. And so a lot of these these institutions that we've just taken for granted, I believe need to be radically wholesalely changed or abolished and start with something new.
There's a question from Brother Khalid Hussain about what can the Muslim organizations do immediately? If one of you or both of you want to take a shot at it.
So basically a short-term and immediate action that our organizations can take.
No, I think, we explain all those things. They educate yourself, rallies, banners, webinars, alliances, working with all other groups. And if the legislative agenda is coming, supporting that in the not only the federal level, but in the city level, county level, state level. So all media talking, social media. So there are several things. There are suggested action items. Every organizations or every individual or every our chapter, they can examine their own capacity and do more than that. Not only that under your capacity, whatever your capacity, do more than that, plan that. And inshallah, maybe you are 5 people, you are planning something, more help will come, I think. Yesterday, like in California, they announced their own rally and they were thinking that maybe 50 to 100 people will come. And they informed the police that only 50 to 100 people will come. Over there, a couple of thousand people come over there. So I think it is really because we are doing for sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So do something, whatever you plan individually, collectively, chapter-wise, national organization-wise, all these suggested action items are there. And then inshallah barakah will come and you will be performing in a best way.
I don't see any hand raised on the phone line, so we don't have any question on the phone.
We're also running out of time. So Jazakallah khairan, thank you very much. I think Imam Khalid Griggs, Dr. Zahid Bukhari, mashallah, thank you very much for your time and your insight and participation in this conversation. It's been immensely valuable. Thank you very much. To our viewers, this is going to be a continuing conversation. We are going to have events continuously coming in. Inshallah, next Saturday at 11 a.m. we are doing a in Bangla session where we want to explain the Black Lives Matter as well as a historic moment that it is right now and how we can understand a better way this movement and what can we do as an organization, as individual. Inshallah, with that we'll invite Muna's today's meeting chair, Muna's Department of Justice and Human Dignities Director, Muhammad Jawad Islam. I invite Jawad Islam to come with his concluding remarks and to conclude today's session, inshallah ta'ala.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الصلاة والسلام على سيد المرسلين وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. Respected speakers, Brother Muhammad Chaman, Imam Khalid Griggs, Dr. Zahid Bukhari, dear moderators, Brother Arman Choudhury, and viewers and listeners, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. I want to thank all of you because you had very great questions and answers. And to me personally, I learned a lot from our respected speakers, Khalid Griggs and Dr. Zahid Bukhari, from South Asian movement, Khilafat movement, anti-British movement, and Bangladeshi contribution of the Bangladeshi community. And also, Imam Khalid Griggs brought off that the Bangladeshi community came to Harlem and positively contributed to our New York community. And Dr. Zahid Bukhari, I want to thank you so much because you lay out the plan, short-term, long-term, individually, and collectively. Dear listeners and viewers, no question that the human history is on turning point. We had many turning points in past. Human history had turning point in 7th century, Islamic rise of Islamic civilization. Human history had another turning point in 15th century, which is Dark Age, medieval age. Human history had another turning point, which is Industrial Revolution, which is early 17th century. Then we had another turning point, which is Internet. And recently we had another turning point of this human history, which is anti-racism movement. There is no question that racism was there since the beginning of human history, human civilization. But at this moment, the way it started from Minnesota to Massachusetts, Arizona to Alabama, California to Kentucky, America to Australia, New Zealand to Nigeria, Germany to Greece, Great Britain to Brazil, you can name it. Everywhere, wherever people is living, they are asking, they are demanding for equality. They are demanding for their freedom, for their rights and prosperity. Especially at this moment, when a human being was begging 8 minutes and 46 seconds for a breath, and he could not have a breath 8 minutes 46 seconds, and George Floyd was died without having a breath. Dear viewers and listeners, so as a community member, as a citizen of this great nation, as a member of Global Village, you, I, and we have a great responsibility, which our speakers already discussed. Imam Khalid Griggs, Dr. Zahid Bukhari already lay out that what are the individual and collective responsibility. So let's work together to make the next century, the centuries to come, a better century, so that a human being can walk well, can walk well, can breathe well. So let's us work together with other community, with greater community, and we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for his help and mercy. And also, inshallah, we'll have this continuous session, and we'll request all of you for joining our next sessions. With that, we are concluding to the session. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله.
وعليكم السلام.
Walaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you very much. This concludes today's session. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.